He noticed the silence before the meeting even began. It wasn't the kind of silence that comes from respect. It was the kind that comes before indifference. Mark adjusted the papers on the table and, for a brief moment, believed that this time would be different. He had prepared for days, reviewed every detail, rehearsed every line. But as soon as he started talking, the familiar feeling returned. Distant eyes, fingers typing, quiet conversations on the side. It was as if his words were evaporating in the air. The worst part was knowing his idea was good. In fact, it was excellent. But for reasons he couldn't explain, no one seemed to listen. Then another colleague said almost the same thing, with the same words, the same logic. And the room came alive. Smiles, agreement, approval. Mark forced a polite smile, but inside, something tightened. No one takes me seriously, he thought. That feeling of invisibility is far more common than people admit. It doesn't just happen to the shy or the insecure. It happens to competent, hardworking people who deliver, who contribute, but somehow go unnoticed. It happens to those who try too hard to be seen and end up being ignored, and to those who try to stay out of trouble and end up disappearing completely. I know it because I lived it. For years, I believed that respect was automatic, the natural result of hard work. If I was dedicated, helpful, kind, and responsible, eventually recognition would come. But it didn't. Not the way I expected. No one teaches us that respect is not requested or granted. It's projected. And the way you see yourself becomes the exact lens through which the world sees you. Mark, like me, thought he had to prove his worth every day, in every email, every presentation, every meeting. But the harder he tried to be heard, the less people listened. Because respect, when pursued with anxiety, looks like need. And need in any workplace smells like weakness. The human mind doesn't respond to words alone, it responds to the energy behind them. When you speak, people don't just hear what you say, they feel how you say it. And if what's underneath is insecurity, hesitation, or a craving for approval, it leaks through in micro-expressions, pauses, tone, and body language. Without realizing it, you communicate the exact opposite of what you want. A Princeton study found that people form an impression of someone's competence in less than 1/10 of a second. It happens too fast for logic to be involved, which means that authority is emotional long before it's rational. Once that impression forms, it's hard to change. That's when I understood something important. The problem wasn't my ideas, it was the way I carried them. I spoke like I was asking for permission, not offering value. My voice, my posture, even my eyes said, "Please listen." And the more I tried to be heard, the less people heard me. Respect doesn't come from convincing words. It comes from the calm confidence of someone who doesn't need to prove anything. People who are taken seriously carry a kind of stillness that can't be faked. It's what I call quiet authority. It doesn't come from position. It comes from coherence. Laura, a marketing analyst I once met, was the opposite of the usual leader stereotype. Soft-spoken, warm, never trying to compete. But every time she entered a room, something shifted. Conversations softened. People turned their heads. When she spoke, she didn't raise her voice, yet everyone listened. I once asked her how she did it. She smiled and said, "I only speak when I truly believe in what I'm saying. And when I speak, I believe every word." People don't respect what you say. They respect how much you believe in what you say. That's what self-respect really is, knowing that your time, your energy, and your voice carry weight. The world mirrors that belief back to you. Psychologists call it internal congruence, when your emotions, your words, and your body all point in the same direction. When that happens, other people's brains pick it up immediately. That's why calm people seem more credible than anxious ones. Humans instinctively trust coherence. Mark started to notice that he didn't have it. When he spoke, he leaned forward, as if begging to be acknowledged. His tone lifted at the end of sentences, like a question. His eyes searched the manager's face for invisible approval. All those little habits combined into one loud message. I'm not sure of myself. And when people sense uncertainty, they stop listening. So Mark made a quiet decision. He would only speak when he actually believed in what he was saying. No more filling silences. No more repeating others. No more chasing agreement. He would talk less, but with purpose. Within weeks, everything changed. People began to wait for him to speak. His words suddenly had weight. There's a power in calm communication. Stillness projects control, and emotional control is perceived as authority. Neuroscience confirms this. The human brain associates a steady, slow voice with leadership. It's evolutionary. We survived by following those who made us feel safe, not those who were the loudest. But this isn't about pretending to be stoic. It's about embodying presence. Presence is when your mind and body are in the same place. When you're trying to please, your body tightens. You shrink. But when you accept yourself, your body expands. Your breath deepens, your shoulders open, your voice finds its rhythm. That's when quiet authority appears. I learned this the hard way, through being ignored. I used to think respect came from being tougher, more assertive, more professional. But that version of me was a mask, and people don't trust masks. They trust coherence. The day I stopped trying to prove and started to simply express, everything changed. My coworkers began to listen. My managers paid attention. Not because I found a communication trick, but because I finally believed in my own worth. Respect isn't given by others. It's perceived by them when they sense you no longer need it. The less you need to be respected, the more you naturally attract it. From that point on, Mark's story changed. He entered meetings calmly, never scanning faces for validation. He spoke with measured tone, made his point, and stopped. When he finished, the silence that followed wasn't indifference anymore. It was attention. Some people think respect comes from power, but power without coherence never sustains respect. A title might grant temporary authority, but behavior decides whether it lasts. The difference between those who inspire and those who intimidate is energy. Humans are drawn to emotional consistency. The brain can sense when someone is at peace with themselves. We naturally follow calmness and recoil from tension. Laura used to say the workplace is an emotional mirror. People feel what you feel. Studies show emotions are contagious in less than 3 seconds. When you radiate calm and confidence, the room synchronizes to your energy. But when you project anxiety, the group instinctively resists. That's why one steady voice can change the tone of an entire meeting. Respect starts long before the first word. It starts with your energy. After that turning point, Mark became an observer. He studied how influence really worked. He noticed how the most respected people didn't fight for attention. They paused before speaking. They listened fully. They didn't rush to win arguments. They simply embodied presence. They didn't need to dominate because they already felt grounded. That's when he realized the hidden truth. The way you feel about yourself is the first thing people hear when you walk into a room. This principle explains why some people are seen as leaders even without titles. They don't act as if they have something to prove. That emotional steadiness reads as safety, and safety is the root of respect. We lose that steadiness when we start living to please. From childhood, we're trained to seek approval, from parents, teachers, peers. As adults, we carry that same pattern to work. We try to be easy to deal with, helpful, agreeable. But every time you mold yourself to fit in, you send a silent message. I don't trust my own shape. Respect begins when you stop shrinking to fit and start occupying space naturally. Denise, who once struggled to be heard, learned this after her promotion. At first, she became careful again, polite to a fault, avoiding conflict. Slowly, she disappeared into her new role. Then she realized she didn't need to be likable to be respected. She became kind but firm, gentle but direct. And she never had to raise her voice again. Kindness without firmness is weakness. Firmness without kindness is rigidity. But when the two coexist, that's real authority. True respect is not about dominating the room. It's about managing your own energy within it. Some people walk in and everything shifts, not because they try to impress, but because their presence is aligned. Their mind is steady, their body open, their energy clear. People respect clarity. A leadership coach once conducted a simple exercise. Two groups walked randomly around a room. One was told to look confident. The other was told to think of someone they trust deeply. The second group, the ones who simply felt trust, were perceived as the most confident. The takeaway is powerful. You don't have to act respected to be respected. You just have to live in alignment with what you believe. The body can't fake what the mind doesn't feel. Pretending confidence leaks through the cracks, but feeling it radiates naturally. People who are grounded in their truth don't need performance. Their authenticity does the talking. Mark learned that being respected had less to do with others and everything to do with integrity. Integrity is invisible, but it's felt. When you stop negotiating your truth for approval, people sense it. They can't explain it, but they listen differently. Respect is not something you gain socially. It's something you awaken internally. When you start acting from that place, the world rearranges itself around you. Those who used to dismiss you lose their grip. Those who value authenticity move closer. The rest fade away. In the end, respect is a filter. It separates those who see your worth from those who only fed on your doubt. Months later, Mark realized he no longer had to try to be taken seriously. He just was. He spoke less, listened more, acted calmly, and attention came naturally. The irony was that when respect finally arrived, he didn't crave it anymore. Because he understood, being taken seriously isn't about others. It's about taking yourself seriously. When you start respecting your own time, your energy, your words, the world simply follows. Respect is a mirror, not a prize. It doesn't come from performance, but from presence. The day Mark understood that, everything quieted. He didn't change his voice, his style, or his posture, only his frequency. And that shift in frequency was something the world could feel. From then on, he no longer struggled to be heard. Every time he spoke, the room listened. The real transformation happens not when others start respecting you, but when you stop needing it. There's a special kind of freedom in letting go of the fear of seeming small. When you stop performing for approval, what's left is clarity, and clarity commands attention. We live in a noisy world where everyone wants to be heard, but few are truly saying something real. Authenticity cuts through that noise like silence in chaos. The brain recognizes truth before logic catches up. That's why some voices change a room without shouting. Mark spent years trying to fit in, only to realize authenticity carries more power than any strategy. When you speak from truth, your voice doesn't have to be perfect, because what moves people isn't your sound, it's your intention. Intention is the heart of influence. It's what others feel before they understand your words. True authority comes from the alignment between what you believe and what you practice. Laura, years later, began teaching authentic communication. During a talk, she said something unforgettable. People don't respect who you pretend to be. They respect who you remain when everything changes. And things always change. Jobs, teams, bosses, environments. The only constant is how you choose to show up. Those who rely on approval are swept by every tide. Those anchored in self-respect become unshakable. That's emotional maturity, living in a way that the respect of others is just an echo, not the source of your sound. One evening, leaving work, Mark caught his reflection in the glass door. The sun was setting behind him. For the first time, he saw peace in his own eyes. No rush, no tension, no trace of the man who once begged to be seen. And he realized, this calm presence was what others had started to feel when he entered a room. True respect doesn't make noise. It doesn't come with applause or instant recognition. It arrives quietly, when you finally align who you are with what you show. When you live in coherence, the world changes how it looks at you. Even if no one says a word, you'll know. The eyes around you change. The tone of voices changes. The space that once felt too small suddenly expands. Not because the world changed, but because you did. There's a silent strength in simply respecting yourself, not shrinking to fit. Not hiding truth for comfort, not trading integrity for belonging. That strength defines the people who leave a mark. They aren't remembered for their volume, but for their calm. They aren't admired for forcing authority, but for embodying it. In a world obsessed with visibility, real influence belongs to those who have found solidity. Because solid people don't need to be seen, they are felt. And maybe that's the ultimate secret. Being taken seriously isn't a privilege of the powerful. It's the natural consequence of those who live with integrity. People who carry a quiet certainty inside. I am no longer what others think of me. Respect doesn't begin when others acknowledge your value. It begins the moment you stop begging for it. And in that moment, when your trembling voice turns calm, the world finally listens. If this message made you reflect on something you can change today, hit like and share it. Someone out there who feels invisible might need to hear this right now. And if you want to keep exploring your inner strength and leadership potential, consider subscribing. Every video here is an invitation to rediscover the quiet power that's already inside you. Because in the end, the respect you've been chasing begins the moment you stop doubting your own worth.